What if the crime scene you're about to investigate isn't what it seems? Imagine stepping into a room where every detail, every object, every shadow feels almost too perfect, like a stage set for a play that's been rehearsed 1,000 times. That's exactly what the forensic team faced the night they entered the luxurious condo tied to a sprawling financial crime. The air was cool, sterile even, with a faint scent of polished wood and expensive cologne lingering in the space. But beneath that calm surface, something was off. Detectives moved cautiously, scanning the room with practiced eyes, yet a creeping unease settled in their gut. The evidence was arranged with unnerving precision. Papers aligned at exact right angles, a laptop positioned just so, and a coffee cup placed deliberately beside a notebook. It wasn't chaos or haste that marked the scene. It was control so absolute it felt artificial. The light filtered through the tall windows, casting geometric patterns across the floor, amplifying the sense that everything was designed, calculated. One detective murmured, "This isn't a crime scene. It's a setup." Others nodded, their instincts prickling with the same suspicion. They knew from years of experience that genuine crime scenes bore the messy fingerprints of human error and panic. But here, nothing was out of place. No hurried footsteps, no accidental fingerprints smudged on glass, no signs of struggle. It was as if someone had crafted a perfect illusion, one that could fool even the most seasoned investigators. The tension thickened as they examined each piece of evidence, searching for the faintest clue to unravel the truth beneath the polished surface. Their flashlights danced over the furniture, glinting off a meticulously arranged stack of documents, a pen lying exactly parallel to the edge of a desk. Every detail screamed intentionality, yet the question loomed larger. Why construct such an immaculate facade? Then, in a moment that would change everything, the lead forensic analyst knelt down and peered through a microscope at a tiny sample collected from the scene. There, caught in the fibers of a carpet thread, was a microscopic synthetic fiber, one that absolutely shouldn't exist in that environment. It was artificial, foreign, a thread pulled from a fabric no one present recognized. That single fiber, invisible to the naked eye but impossible to ignore, shattered the illusion. It hinted at a deception far more complex than anyone had imagined. What secrets did this tiny speck hold? And who had the skill and the audacity to rewrite reality itself? The answers waited just beyond reach, promising to unravel years of perfect lies. Before we dive deeper, take a moment to settle in. This story isn't just about what meets the eye. As the layers peel back, unexpected twists and hidden motives will come into focus, revealing how far someone was willing to go to keep the truth buried. Every detail matters, and what seems insignificant now will soon become crucial. Stick around, because what unfolds next will challenge everything you thought you knew and pull you into a web far more intricate than any of us imagined. For years, a shadow moved just beyond the reach of law enforcement. A figure whose handiwork wasn't about wiping away evidence, but about planting it with a precision so meticulous it defied belief. This man didn't erase crimes, he manufactured them. He was the architect of false realities, a master forger who spun entire narratives from nothing but synthetic clues. Fingerprints appeared where no one had ever been, blood spatters mapped onto walls that had never witnessed violence, digital timestamps that rewrote the chronology of events, and strands of DNA that belonged to no living soul, yet were as convincing as any genuine trace. Investigators whispered about him in hushed tones, a ghostly presence haunting the margins of their cases. No one knew his name, no one had ever caught a glimpse of his face, but his work was unmistakable. He was a phantom whose creations disrupted investigations and sent detectives down endless dead ends. Every time a case seemed airtight, it would unravel under the weight of fabricated evidence that was too perfect, too deliberate. His fingerprints weren't just planted, they were crafted, engineered with such skill that even the most advanced forensic labs were fooled. DNA samples, synthesized in clandestine labs, bore mutations and markers that didn't exist in any known human genome, yet they fit neatly into the puzzle he constructed. Blood spatters were staged with an artist's eye, designed to mislead analysts about the angle, velocity, and timing of supposed attacks. The digital realm was no less vulnerable. Timestamps on security footage, call logs, and device metadata could be altered with a subtlety so refined that timelines shifted seamlessly, creating alibis or implicating innocent people with chilling accuracy. He understood the intersection of technology and biology like no one else, blending both to fabricate scenes so authentic they bled into reality. Each piece of evidence wasn't just a clue. It was a carefully woven thread in an elaborate tapestry of deception. Law enforcement officers and forensic experts began to suspect that they weren't chasing a person but a legend. The ghost became a myth whispered in precincts and labs, a specter that mocked their efforts and challenged the very foundations of justice. His existence was debated, his methods dissected, but no one could deny the havoc left in his wake. Cases once thought closed reopened under suspicion. Convictions were questioned as new evidence surfaced, only to be debunked by the same impossible standards he set. The ghost didn't just manipulate evidence, he manipulated belief, turning truth into conjecture and certainty into doubt. Fear grew alongside fascination. Could anyone truly outsmart this invisible puppeteer? Was he working alone, or part of a larger network? What motivated a man to create false crimes, weaving lies so deep into official records that entire investigations crumbled beneath his touch? The answers remained elusive, buried beneath layers of deception as impenetrable as the man himself. What made him so terrifying wasn't just his skill, but his purpose. He didn't seek to hide crime. He sought to invent it, to rewrite history with forgeries that became harder to distinguish from reality than the genuine articles they replaced. He was not a simple criminal but a craftsman of falsehoods, a creator of illusions that ensnared everyone who crossed his path. And as the years passed, the ghost's legend only grew, an unseen force shaping lives, careers, and destinies with nothing more than a fingerprint, a drop of blood, or a timestamp. In the world of perfect crimes gone wrong, where every detail could be a trap, this ghost was the ultimate architect of chaos. No detective could anticipate what he would do next. No forensic expert could claim certainty in their findings. The ghost was a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous crimes are not those erased but those invented, and that the line between truth and fiction could be manipulated, blurred, or shattered entirely by a single invisible hand. The forger's mastery was not born of impulse but of painstaking study and relentless precision. He immersed himself in the minutiae of forensic science, devouring textbooks, research papers, even attending public lectures and trials disguised as an eager student. His goal was clear: to understand every nuance of evidence processing so deeply that he could anticipate the decisions and biases of investigators before they even began their work. This wasn't mere mimicry. It was an intimate knowledge of the system's heartbeat, allowing him to insert his fabrications so seamlessly they would appear as natural as breath. He knew that real forensic evidence carried a subtle randomness, a natural imperfection that defied mechanical reproduction. To replicate this, he developed what he called controlled chaos. Each forged item was subjected to random, yet carefully calibrated variations, smudges on fingerprints, uneven ink dispersal on documents, microscopic abrasions on fibers. These minute inconsistencies were essential. Too perfect, and the evidence screamed counterfeit. To the untrained eye, or even the seasoned forensic analyst, these tiny flaws provided the illusion of authenticity. He could mimic the natural wear of a shoe sole or the sporadic pattern of blood spatter as if he had been there at the scene himself, but it was all a masterful act of replication. His chemical forgeries were perhaps the most impressive. Understanding that forensic labs routinely subjected samples to spectral analysis, chromatography, and other high-tech assays, he painstakingly recreated chemical signatures down to the molecular level. Using a collection of rare compounds and custom-made reagents sourced from obscure suppliers, he crafted inks and fibers that would pass spectral scrutiny. Sometimes, he even harvested trace elements from genuine crime scenes to integrate into his forgeries, embedding microscopic particles that would mislead elemental analysis. His secret laboratory was a sanctuary of glass vials, precision scales, and distillation apparatus, hidden behind false walls in an abandoned factory. Here, every compound was mixed with ritualistic care, under strict environmental controls to prevent contamination, ensuring that no foreign elements would betray his hand. The psychological dimension of his work was no less crucial. He studied investigative psychology to predict how detectives, forensic experts, and jurors would react to different types of evidence. This insight allowed him to plant clues that would steer inquiries down false paths, exploiting common cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias or the tendency to overvalue certain types of proof. He would craft forged letters with handwriting that suggested a suspect's motive, or DNA traces that seemed too convenient, yet sufficiently plausible to avoid immediate suspicion. Each piece was a calculated move in a larger game of deception, designed to create a narrative that investigators would unwittingly accept and defend. His workspace reflected the methodical nature of his craft. The forger maintained multiple hidden stations, each dedicated to different phases of his operation. One for fingerprint replication, another for chemical synthesis, a third for document fabrication. Each area was meticulously organized, with tools laid out in precise order, fine brushes, digital microscopes, inkjet printers adapted for forensic-grade inks, and fume hoods to manage volatile substances. Before beginning a project, he followed a ritualistic sequence, cleansing his hands with a special solution, calibrating instruments to exact specifications, and reviewing all known details of the case to ensure his forgeries fit seamlessly into the narrative. This ritual grounded him, transforming a complex process into a series of disciplined acts that minimized error. Despite all his meticulous planning and flawless execution, his perfection relied on one vulnerable element: human unpredictability. No matter how expertly he crafted his lies, the slightest deviation in human behavior, a sudden confession, an unexpected witness, or a detective's intuition, could unravel the entire illusion. His system, as perfect as it was in fabrication, depended ultimately on the chaos of human nature to remain undiscovered. In the end, it was not his skill that defined him, but the fragile balance between order and chance that governed every perfect crime gone wrong. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a living space that could have been lifted from a luxury catalog, every surface gleaming under the soft, ambient lighting, every detail arranged with the meticulous care of a staged photo shoot. The air smelled faintly of expensive cedarwood and a hint of something floral, almost antiseptic. Detectives Harper and Lou stepped inside, their eyes scanning the condo, already feeling the weight of an invisible script pressing down on them. The living room was a masterclass in curated perfection. A sleek white leather sofa sat centered on a plush rug of muted grays, pillows fluffed and aligned with surgical precision. On the coffee table, a crystal decanter was half filled with a deep amber liquid, and two glasses stood beside it, one untouched, the other with a single, perfectly formed droplet of red wine caught mid-slide down its side. The kind of detail that might look accidental, but here, it screamed deliberate. Harper crouched to examine the tabletop. Fingerprints, too pristine. No smudges, no overlapping prints, as if the surfaces had been wiped clean by someone obsessively erasing their presence. Even the faint prints left behind had been selectively preserved. No partials, no smears. Just neat, isolated marks that seemed to say, "Look here, but don't look too close." It was a signature of control, the subtle command of a forger confident in his narrative. Blood droplets near the entryway caught Lou's attention next. The stains were crimson on glossy marble, but their pattern was unsettling. They formed a sequence too deliberate to be random, each droplet spaced with mathematical precision, their circular shapes mirroring one another as if painted by a stencil. Harper's fingers hovered just above the floor, reluctant to touch. The symmetry was unnatural, a staged echo of violence rather than its chaotic reality. The kitchen gleamed as well, all chrome and polished granite. A knife lay on the counter, its blade spotless, angled exactly 45 degrees away from the sink. Too perfect, too intentional. Nearby, a cutting board bore faint marks of use, but the crumbs were swept into neat piles, as if tidying had been paused mid-motion. Against the refrigerator, a small note was stuck with a magnet. "Remember the meeting at 3. The handwriting was elegant, almost practiced, but something about its placement felt too obvious, as if it were bait for prying eyes. Harper exchanged a glance with Lou. The condo was less a crime scene than a stage set, and they were the unwilling actors being led through a carefully choreographed performance. Every item, every mark, was arranged to convey a story, one of panic, betrayal, and finality. Yet beneath the surface, a dissonance hummed, like a single off-key note in an otherwise flawless symphony. Moving into the bedroom, the detectives found more of the same. The bed was immaculately made, the sheets taut and wrinkle-free, tucked with military precision. A single glass of water sat on the bedside table, untouched, with a single lipstick smudge on its rim that looked almost too perfect, as if tested by a brushstroke rather than a hurried sip. The closet doors were slightly ajar, revealing a wardrobe arranged by color and fabric weight, as if the owner had paused mid-selection but left no sign of haste. Harper's gaze caught the window, a panoramic view of the city skyline, dazzling and distant. Yet the curtains hung exactly halfway closed, framing the scene like a postcard. The room felt frozen in time, a moment caught between life and death, but more frozen still in a narrative that someone else had written. Then, something subtle flickered in Harper's mind, a detail barely registering at first, buried beneath the overwhelming sense of artificiality. The way the blood droplets aligned, the precise angles of objects, the untouched glass and the staged note. It all fit too neatly into a story that seemed designed to mislead. But what was missing? What crucial thread had the forger left out, or perhaps woven so tightly into the fabric of the scene that it had become invisible? Lou noticed Harper's pause and followed his gaze, sensing the hesitation. "What is it?" she asked quietly. Harper shook his head, the unease settling deeper. "I don't know yet, but this isn't just a scene. It's a trap. We're inside the narrative he wants us to believe. And somewhere in here is a lie so carefully hidden, it's almost impossible to see." They stood in silence, the condo's perfection pressing in around them, as if the walls themselves were waiting for them to stumble, waiting for the moment when the illusion would crack and the truth would finally bleed through. The fiber was almost imperceptible at first, a mere sliver of synthetic thread caught on the edge of the shattered vase. Eager to uncover its secrets, the team carefully transferred it to a sterile slide, placing it under the lab's high-powered UV microscope. As the beam illuminated the sample, the fiber glowed with an eerie, iridescent sheen that shifted subtly from violet to electric blue. Under magnification, its microtexture revealed a tightly woven pattern unlike any common textile. The surface bore minuscule ridges arranged in a repeating hexagonal lattice, a design intended to enhance durability and resist abrasion. This pattern was not something mass-produced. It was distinctive, almost bespoke. Amelia leaned closer, adjusting the UV intensity to tease out any hidden markings. "Look at this," she murmured, pointing to faint, almost imperceptible fluorescent dots embedded along the fiber's length. These weren't random imperfections, they formed a coded sequence, a kind of microscopic watermark. She reached for the spectrometer, initiating a scan of the fiber's chemical composition. The results were startling. A complex polymer blend with trace elements of a rare fluoropolymer compound, one used exclusively in specialized protective gear. "Cross-referencing with the materials database now," Harper said, fingers flying over the keyboard. The room seemed to hold its breath as the computer sifted through thousands of entries. Then the screen flashed, discontinued forensic suits, Model FX9. Production ceased in 2012. Harper's eyes narrowed. Only a handful of these suits were ever made, and even fewer distributed. They were prototypes for a now-abandoned line of crime scene investigators' protective gear, designed to be impervious to contamination and chemical exposure. A palpable tension settled over the group. The fiber wasn't just any trace evidence. It was a direct link to a very exclusive set of individuals. "That means whoever planted this fiber had access to one of these suits," Amelia said quietly. "And with production halted over a decade ago, only a select few people ever got their hands on one." The implications hit like a freight train. This was no random clue left behind by accident. It was a deliberate signature, a silent calling card embedded within the crime scene. Harper's mind raced through the known list of recipients, former forensic specialists, a handful of retired agents, and, crucially, the same group that had surfaced repeatedly in the shadowy undercurrents of past investigations tied to the forger's handiwork. "They knew we'd find this," Harper said grimly. "This fiber wasn't just contamination. It was a trap within the trap." The team exchanged looks, the weight of realization sinking in. The forger was one of the few who ever wore that suit. Someone with intimate knowledge of forensic protocols, someone who understood how to manipulate evidence at the microscopic level. Amelia's voice broke through the silence. "There's more," she said, holding up the fiber to the UV light again. "Preliminary chemical assays show trace residues of a rare industrial solvent, one used only in a handful of clandestine labs. This fiber isn't just a clue. It's a breadcrumb leading to a much larger operation." Harper's eyes darkened with resolve. "If we follow this thread literally, we're not just unraveling a single crime. We're about to expose an entire network. And it starts with this fiber." The room seemed to contract, the weight of impending revelation heavy in the air. As the fiber's light flickered under the microscope, subtle yet undeniable, Harper realized this single strand held the power to unravel the perfect crime, and everything hidden beneath it. The forger's mistake was microscopic, almost laughable in size, but catastrophic in consequence. The question now was how deep the rabbit hole went, and whether they had the courage to pull on the thread until the whole web came crashing down. Harper sat back, eyes fixed on the glowing monitor as the fiber's details magnified further. The initial shock of discovery gave way to methodical determination. This was no ordinary thread. It bore the faintest traces of a synthetic adhesive, one that, at first glance, seemed mundane but was, in fact, a signature hallmark. The team had cataloged dozens of past crime scenes, each seemingly unrelated, each sealed by their own unique riddles. Yet, under this microscope, patterns began to emerge, subtle fingerprints woven into the fabric of deception. Detectives pored over archival photographs and forensic reports from cases long considered closed. They scanned for anomalies that might have slipped past earlier investigations. Minute specks of dust, faint smear marks, peculiar adhesive residues. Slowly, a narrative began to shape itself from these scattered clues. Every scene tainted by the forger featured an identical adhesive compound, one that resisted standard chemical breakdown and left a near-invisible residue. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a deliberate choice, a calling card hidden in plain sight. The team's breakthrough came when forensic analyst Jenna cross-referenced digital images from several cases. Utilizing high-resolution enhancement software, she detected mirrored smear patterns on glass surfaces and paper evidence. These smudges weren't random. They mirrored one another perfectly, like a distorted reflection repeated across time and space. It was as if the forger had an unconscious ritual, a habitual motion that left behind these telltale marks. The mirrored smears, frustratingly slight, had confounded previous investigators, considered accidental or environmental, until now. Further scrutiny revealed synthetic dust particles embedded within the adhesive residues. Unlike common environmental contaminants, these particles originated from a rare industrial polymer used exclusively in a handful of manufacturing facilities. Tracking the supply chain narrowed the potential sources drastically. This dust was never native to the crime scenes. It was a foreign element introduced deliberately, a microscopic breadcrumb trail. The team cross-checked shipping records, supplier logs, and employee rosters, searching for a match with their suspects' known whereabouts. Meanwhile, the digital evidence team uncovered repeated distortions in the altered photographs and scanned documents. These weren't accidental corruptions but intentional manipulations, digital fingerprints left during the forgery process. The distortions aligned perfectly with the adhesive's chemical signature and the dust particles. It was as if the forger's modus operandi transcended mediums, physical tampering mirrored in digital deceit. This multidimensional pattern was unlike anything the team had encountered, a complex web that pointed unmistakably to a single individual. With each new piece of evidence, the field of possible theories narrowed. What started as dozens of potential suspects and motives condensed into one undeniable conclusion. The unique combination of adhesive residue, mirrored smears, synthetic dust, and digital distortion was too precise, too consistent to be random. It was a forensic fingerprint woven through time, an invisible thread linking disparate events into a unified tapestry. Harper felt the weight of this realization settle in. The forger's arrogance had been his downfall. His insistence on perfection had ironically left a pattern too distinct to erase. Each crime scene, once viewed in isolation, now revealed itself as a chapter in a larger story, each anomaly a deliberate stroke in a masterpiece of deception. The fiber was more than a clue. It was the key that unlocked the entire sequence. The team prepared to confront the suspect with this mountain of compiled evidence. The forger's carefully constructed facade was about to crumble, exposed by the very precision that had once made him untouchable. The perfect crime, it seemed, was imperfect after all, not because of a glaring mistake, but because of the subtle, unyielding pattern hidden in his perfection. The team gathered in the dimly lit conference room. A digital map of the forger's movements spread across the table. Each node represented a painstakingly placed piece of evidence. A fingerprint here, a forged document there, all perfectly calibrated to mislead investigators. But now, those pieces were no longer isolated. They formed a pattern, a signature of methodical precision that the forger had unwittingly stamped on every step he took. Reconstructing his workflow began with the smallest details. Investigators replicated the exact materials he used, sourcing identical inks, papers, and fibers. Laboratory technicians worked side by side, mimicking his forgeries stroke by stroke, testing how he layered ink to avoid detection, how he aged documents to create plausible wear. It was a painstaking process, each replication revealing subtle tells. The pressure of his pen, the rhythm of his handwriting, the microscopic abrasions left by the tools he favored. But it wasn't just about the physical materials. Behavioral analysts dove into the timing of his moves, the intervals between planting false leads, the calculated delays designed to keep the investigation chasing shadows. They noticed how he preferred working during late hours, when fewer people were around, and how he always left a narrow window between actions, just enough to establish an alibi but never enough to feel rushed. His habits were predictable not because they were careless, but because they were deliberate. The precision that shielded him also tethered him to a pattern. As the team pieced together these clues, a portrait of the forger's technique emerged. He approached each crime scene not as a chaotic mess to exploit, but as an intricate puzzle to engineer. Every planted clue was carefully balanced. Too obvious, and it would unravel the deception. Too subtle, and it would be overlooked entirely. This equilibrium, however, was his weakness. His insistence on control left a unique fingerprint on the timeline and the physical evidence, one that was impossible to erase. One breakthrough came when the forensic specialists cross-checked fibers found at multiple crime scenes. These threads were not random remnants but came from a rare blend of fabric. The team's textile expert compared the fibers against thousands of known samples, narrowing the search down to a handful of manufacturers. Then, a match, a fiber from a very specific suit, custom-ordered and sold only once in the city, appeared in the database. The realization sent a ripple through the room. The forger's meticulous nature had led him to wear this exact suit during several crucial stages of his operation. He had been so exacting in his choices that even his clothing left a trace. It was a detail almost too precise to be true, but the evidence didn't lie. With mounting anticipation, the investigators verified the purchase records from the boutique, confirming a single transaction that matched the fiber's unique weave and dye. The date aligned perfectly with the period when the forger was most active. This was no coincidence. It was a thread that could unravel the entire tapestry of deception. As the lead detective prepared to confront the suspect with this newfound evidence, a chilling question lingered in the air. Could the forger have anticipated this final unraveling? Or was there another layer of his plan yet to be uncovered? The team braced themselves as the suspect's carefully constructed world began to collapse, thread by thread. The forger's psyche was a labyrinth of contradictions. A man whose need to create false realities stemmed from more than just financial gain or external pressure. At the heart of his motivations lay an insatiable ego, one that craved not only recognition but dominion over the very concept of truth. To him, reality was malleable, a canvas upon which he could paint narratives that suited his whims. This desire for control was both intoxicating and dangerous, feeding a compulsion to manipulate perceptions with precision and finesse. His fabrications were not mere lies, but carefully engineered constructs designed to rewrite history, influence outcomes, and bend the world to his will. For years, the forger operated in the shadows, a ghost behind layers of deception so intricate that detection seemed impossible. His success was rooted in an obsessive attention to detail and a profound understanding of human behavior. He exploited the inherent trust people placed in documents and appearances, knowing that few questioned authenticity when the facade was convincing enough. His tools were not just inks and papers. They were psychological ploys, forged relationships, and meticulously crafted backstories that disarmed suspicion. The forger was a master at reading his targets, tailoring each interaction to build confidence and erase doubt. Recruitment of clients was another testament to his cunning. He didn't simply sell forgeries. He sold solutions to desperate needs and hidden ambitions. Whether it was a high-profile business executive seeking to bolster a fraudulent deal, or a shadowy figure in the criminal underworld needing plausible deniability, he positioned himself as an indispensable ally. His reputation, carefully nurtured through whispered referrals and discreet meetings, became both shield and sword. He wielded exclusivity like currency, making clients feel part of an elite circle that understood the true power of manufactured truth. This network thrived in secrecy, each transaction reinforcing the illusion of invincibility. Yet, despite his meticulousness, it was a microscopic fiber, a tiny, overlooked detail that shattered his empire. This fiber, embedded in a supposedly authentic document, betrayed the origin of the forgery. It was a flaw so minute that only forensic science could detect it, a testament to the limits of human precision and the inevitability of imperfection. The discovery was seismic, unraveling years of deception and exposing the intricate web the forger had spun. It was a stark reminder that even the most elaborate lies hinge on fragile threads, vulnerable to the smallest flaw. As the evidence mounted, the lead detective and their team prepared for the confrontation that would bring the forger's reign to an end. They understood that facing a man so deeply entrenched in manipulation required more than just presenting facts. It demanded psychological insight and a careful strategy to dismantle his defenses. The weight of anticipation filled the room as they reviewed every detail, ready to challenge a man who had long controlled the narrative. The question was no longer if the forger would crumble, but how far he would go to protect the illusion, and what secrets might still lie hidden beneath the surface. He leaned back in the chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin, a small, sardonic smile playing on his lips. "You really think a single fiber can topple years of meticulous work?" His voice was calm, almost amused, as if the notion was laughable. "I've built my reputation on precision, on perfection. Every stroke, every detail flawless. You're reaching." His eyes scanned the faces before him, daring them to prove otherwise. The lead investigator slid a small, sealed evidence bag across the table. Inside, a tiny fragment of fabric, barely visible to the naked eye. "This fiber was found at the scene, embedded in the victim's clothing," she said steadily. "Chemical analysis confirms it matches the exact synthetic blend used in your suits. In fact, the suit manufacturer confirmed a purchase under your name 2 weeks prior." He blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "That's circumstantial," he murmured, voice tightening just a fraction. "Millions of suits are sold every year. Proves nothing." His fingers curled into fists, knuckles whitening, but his gaze remained defiant. The investigator didn't waver. "The fiber's dye composition matches the batch from your purchase. The stitching pattern is unique to that manufacturer's limited edition line, which you alone ordered in the city. It wasn't available to the public before that date." A slow shift began beneath his veneer. His breathing grew uneven, shallow, an involuntary rhythm betraying the calm he'd projected. His shoulders, once erect and commanding, sagged slightly, as if the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes now bore down upon him. The room seemed to contract, the sterile walls closing in with suffocating clarity. He swallowed hard, eyes darting to the fiber, then to the purchase record laid out before him like a damning manuscript. The microscopic thread that had escaped his notice now unraveled the carefully woven tapestry of lies. Years of flawless deception, undone by a fragment so small it might have been dismissed by anyone less thorough. The mocking smile faltered, lips parting in a silent gasp. The controlled cadence of his speech dissipated, replaced by a tremor creeping through his voice. You don't understand the work I do," he stammered, voice cracking. "It's not just art. The science, it's craft." But you missed this," the investigator interrupted gently, leaning forward. "One fiber, one tiny mistake. It's enough." His gaze dropped to his hands, trembling now, fingers twitching as if grasping for an anchor in a storm. The legend he'd built, the untouchable figure who manipulated truth like clay, was crumbling. No longer the commander of the narrative, he was reduced to a man exposed, fragile, human, cornered. The silence stretched, heavy and insistent, until finally, the first crack appeared. His voice, barely above a whisper, began to fracture the walls he'd built. "All right, yes, I was there, but it wasn't meant to happen this way." His confession hovered on the edge of escape, hesitant but undeniable. The beginning of truth bleeding through the cracks of a masterpiece shattered by a single fiber. In the end, it was neither a grand revelation nor an overwhelming piece of evidence that toppled the architect of deceit. No masterstroke, no high-profile slip, no glaring contradiction. Instead, it was the smallest, most inconspicuous detail, a single synthetic fiber that unraveled everything. A fragment invisible to all but the most meticulous eye, a thread that no forger, no matter how skilled, could erase from the fabric of his lies. For years, he had woven intricate narratives, crafting entire worlds from smoke and mirrors, blurring the lines between reality and fiction. Each story was a fortress, seemingly impenetrable, built with calculated precision and unwavering confidence. He wasn't just a forger. He was a conjurer of realities, a puppeteer who controlled the perceptions of everyone who crossed his path. His crimes appeared perfect, flawless in execution, untouchable by any conventional means. Yet perfection, as this saga teaches us, is an illusion. Imperfect details, overlooked and underestimated, are the silent assassins of even the most masterful schemes. That single synthetic fiber, so small it might have been dismissed by anyone else, held the key. It was a thread that betrayed the carefully constructed narrative, a whisper of truth amidst a sea of lies. It tied the man to the scene, to the moments he wished to erase, to the realities he tried to rewrite. In a world where every action was measured and every detail controlled, this tiny anomaly was an echo of imperfection, an unintentional signature that no amount of cunning could conceal. As he confessed, his voice trembled not just from the pressure of exposure, but from the realization that his empire of illusions rested on fragile ground. The silence that had once been his ally now pressed in, suffocating and relentless. The walls he had built, brick by brick, began to crumble not because of force, but because of a subtle fracture, a flaw so minute it almost escaped notice. And in that fracture, truth found its way, messy, imperfect, and undeniably human. This case reminds us that no matter how meticulously a perfect crime may be planned, it is the imperfect details that ultimately bring it down. The smallest oversight, the slightest inconsistency, becomes the catalyst for unmasking deception. It's a powerful reminder that truth, no matter how faint or flawed, has a way of breaking through even the most impenetrable facades. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this journey. If you followed every twist and turn of this investigation, comment below with the phrase, "Thread of Truth," to let us know you caught every moment. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss what we uncover next. Because in the world of perfect crimes gone wrong, the next secret is always waiting to be found.